Welcome to this episode of Brains Trust. This episode is about creating human capital. One of the greatest thinkers around creation of human capital is author and philosopher Charles Handy, who wrote many books, and he had a stellar career with Royal Dutch Shell. And amongst his books is a classic called Second Curve, which is about reinventing yourself, and it's most appropriate when you're looking at careers which spread over 40 to 45 years. My guest today is a leader whose passion is leveraging the good in people. He has spent a lifetime in every assignment to mentor those who are part of his team, as well as those he did business with, customers, vendors, consultants. The fulcrum of his motivation always was getting people to give off their best. He invested his time in mentoring, teaching, and training people. His passion earned him the sobriquet of being called an alchemist, the ability to turn base metal to gold. I would encourage you to read his books and blogs and watch his video series. And my guest is SPY, a wonderful acronym for Prakash Iyer, my guest today. Welcome to Dialogue with Peers, Prakash. A pleasure to be with you.
Hey, so good to be here, Subroto, and thank you so much for having me here. Such a pleasure to be reconnecting.
Prakash, start by telling us something about yourself, because there are many who follow you, but for those who don't know you.
Good to see that you've retained your sense of humor, Subroto. Far from famous, just another ordinary guy, someone who's, I think, having a lot of fun doing stuff that I really love. But maybe by way of an introduction, how do I say it? I spent about 30 years in the corporate world, being part of some fantastic teams, selling everything from soap to colas to yellow pages to even diapers. And then, of course, stepped out to do things that I really enjoy doing, which is to help other people perhaps become as good as they were meant to be. So I write a bit, I speak a bit. I'm a certified leadership coach. I'm an uncertified cricket junkie, so I spend a lot of time watching cricket and pretty much having fun. That's me.
Prakash, let's start at the beginning of the career of young managers who join large organizations as trainees. What would you look for when you are hiring at the entry level?
So what would I look for in a young person joining a company as a management trainee? Apart from some of the usual stuff that you would use perhaps to filter people, the two or three things that I would really look for would be, one, curiosity. I'd want to see a sense of curiosity, of wanting to know things that they don't know. So this ability to be comfortable with stuff that they don't know or are not masters of, but are willing to learn. So I think curiosity would be something that's top of my list. I'd certainly want to see some evidence of having been a part of a team, evidence of being able to get along with other people, to respect other people for what they are good at. So this whole ability to be a part of a team, to get along with other people, to work alongside other people, I think that would be something I'd look for. And I'd probably look for some evidence of having slogged to achieve something and perhaps failed at it. I'm not necessarily a great fan of people who seem to have got everything right and done all the things exceptionally well, topped their class, captained their team, did everything right. And I sometimes worry because later in life, that's not going to be the script that will play out. So some evidence of perhaps having tried and failed is something else that I'd look for.
Prakash, your experience is rich, and you had the privilege of joining Hindustan Lever as a management trainee in a structured induction and training program the company provided. Can you just walk us through what was it like?
No question, Subroto. I think the Hindustan Lever, as it was called then, or Unilever, Hindustan Unilever as it's known now, they've got a fantastic management trainee program. Something that I'd like to believe many other companies have also tried to adopt. as a learning or as a best practice. What worked for me, I think, were a couple of things. The first would be the fact that you saw that there was commitment to your learning. And that meant that pretty much every senior person in the organization was at some stage committed to the management training program. And that would mean either spending time as a coach or a mentor, or taking people under your wing and trying to help them to get it right. And just knowing that there were such fabulous leaders and some fairly senior folks who were willing to share from their experience, share their time, and to try and help you to get better. I think that in itself was a big learning and a big incentive to say that one day I want to be like them. The second thing that struck me about the training program, I think, was the requirement that you had to go out and do the hard yards. So, as a kid coming out of business school, no one says, I want to make a career in sales. We all come out thinking we want to make a career in marketing. And we start thinking that, we'll create these fantastic advertising campaigns and win all those awards and be feted for having done a great job of building brands. But Unilever or Hindustan Lever taught us that it all starts in that little store in the country, where in every corner of this country, where customers go out and spend hard-earned money to buy your products. So what does it take for us to get our products into those stores? What does it take for us to make sure that shopkeeper is actually selling that one extra cake of soap? And learning the ropes there and spending time as a salesperson. And I remember going through small town Tamil Nadu, taking those late night buses and just trying to meet your month's sales target, I think was a fantastic learning. Yeah. And I think from there, the other thing that happened, Subroto, was that you got sent out to experience different parts of the business. So it wasn't as if, oh, you're a marketing guy or a sales guy, and that's what you will do. So you got a chance to spend time in purchase. You figured out what does it take to buy oil. You figured what does it take to make soap. So you spend time in a factory. We even spent 2 months in rural India, in Eta district in UP, which would in many ways count as 2 of the best months of my life. So I think there was a lot to learn by just pushing people out of their comfort zones, of doing the hard yards, learning how businesses run, and all the time knowing that you've got a mentor, a coach, or a senior leader who is committed to your learning, committed to your success. But like I said, it's not just Hindustan Lever. I'd be very keen to hear from you, Subroto. I'm sure when you went to ITC, they had a fantastic leadership development program too. So tell me more about it.
Well, ITC's training was very, very structured. When I reached the branch I was assigned to, which was Bangalore, I was handed over a manual, a training manual, which I think had 300 odd sheets in it. I still have it. And on each sheet, it said what exactly I would be doing on that particular day, who I would be working with, and what are the things I'm expected to learn. At the end of every week, there was a test which was administered to ensure that I had learned what I was supposed to do during the week that went by. And this covered working with frontline salesmen, working in warehouses, moving trucks, seeing how goods moved from the factory to the godowns, how to manage inventory, which was very critical, across all the SKUs which came from different factories. There was also a factory training, so I trained in the Bangalore factory to see how cigarettes were made. And I was in the accounts department to see how the entire sales accounting process happened, and how do you manage working capital, how do you manage cash. And in the marketplace, you learned how to do selling into the stores, in-store branding, retail furniture, promotions. So it was a 360-degree kind of exposure to the work that I was expected to know before I got confirmed. But at the end of that period, there was a 15-day workshop which was held, where every director of the company came and spoke to the pupils, as they were called in ITC. And on the last day of the program, the chairman of the company at the time, Mr. Ajit Haksar, he would come and spend a day with us. And that gave us a tremendous insight into what we were getting into, what was expected of us, what were the values, what was the culture of the company, and why we were doing what we were doing. And I just felt it was such a strong foundation which helped us as we went along. Equally, almost every year there were 2 or 3 workshops relating to work, marketing, sales, product development, which were held and you were expected to attend. And there were a large number of senior managers who were attending these programs. So you observed and learned as you went along. And you were then pulled into the planning of the business bottom up as you went along. And there was a culture of encouraging reading books, not only management books, but a wider variety of books as a habit. It was expected that you would be learning the languages and the cultures of the markets you were assigned to. So, for example, in my case, I was from Calcutta, but it was expected that I would learn some amount of Kannada to be able to talk to my customers in the marketplace. Later, when I was posted in Hyderabad, to try and understand a little bit of Telugu, and also the festivals, the food, and the various cultural nuances of the market. And I thought that was a very, very useful and enriching experience for me. And I think that really helps.
Great one. I think understanding the environment you operate in, understanding the nuances, the culture, the people, I think all these are extremely important. But there's something else that I learned pretty early on, which is don't expect other people to like the things you do or to do the things you do. And therefore, just because I might have been fond of reading, it didn't necessarily mean that that poor sales guy in Madurai would also be a great fan of books and would read everything I told him to read. So that may not have always happened. But what I did discover was that sometimes just spending time out there is a great way to soak in life, lessons, people, and understand what's happening out there. So you can't expect to get familiar with that market if you would also want everyone in your team to be constantly coming to headquarters and spending time in your conference room telling you what's happening in the market and why the brands are doing the way they are or what their challenges are. I think it worked very well when you went out to the market, you spent time over there, and a lot of your learning actually happened over that late night meal in a small restaurant in a beaten down part of that city. But that's when you got to know the person, the family, the challenges, the aspirations. And I think I've probably been a storyteller from pretty early in my life. And to your point about books, what I would often do is to, if I had read something in that week, it's quite likely that there would have been one little story from a book which would have been stuck in my head. And I would make sure that I would share that with whoever I was having a meal with on that day. And that was my way of saying, hey, here's something I learned and I found it fascinating. And here it is. And you might find it interesting too. And that's really something that stayed with me, I think so.
So Prakash, now a young manager joins a company and he has a 40-year career ahead of him. What is your take on role of mentors and how do we create leaders?
I think that's a 36-year frame that I'm going to try and answer in maybe a couple of minutes. Here are some of the things that come to my mind as I think of that journey from that young person who's come on board perhaps as a management trainee, 23-year-old, and what happens thereafter, and what can you do to make sure that the second half of that career delivers on the promise that you might have seen in the first half. The first, I think there's got to be a commitment to delivering results. So you need to ensure that whatever it is that you're tasked with in those early years, you do a great job. It's not about how smart you are or how much you know, and far less about where did you study or what's your background, but it's your ability to deliver on results. So So if you're tasked with something, make sure you're delivering. I think that would be a good first lesson to have, which is to say that you might have all the promise in the world for the future and you might be meant for bigger roles, but in the role you are in, are you able to deliver results? I think that's a big one. The second one, I think, would be to try and reinforce the message that it's okay to not know. It's okay to say, I failed, or I'm not sure I got this right, or I don't know what this means. I think very early on, you don't want young leaders and managers to settle into a comfort zone of saying, I will operate in my area of competence. I will do the things I know I can do well. You want to constantly challenge them, push the frontiers and try and say, hey, push them into situations where they'll struggle a little bit, but they'll learn and they'll come out stronger. And I think a third for me would be just making sure that you get young people to recognize that it's not about you, it's about them. As in, it's not about the individual, it's about the team. So how do you get people to recognize that their success is linked to their ability to get other people to be successful? I worry sometimes, Subroto, that very early in our lives, we are all taught to compete. So we go to school and college and we are constantly competing to be ahead of the other guy. Whereas, truth be told, when you get to work, you've got to recognize that it's about collaborating. It's not about competing. It's not about you getting ahead. It's about you taking people along and making sure that they get ahead, that they are successful. So those are some of the things that I think become the cornerstones on which successful careers can be built. Keep learning, keep slogging, keep delivering, work with people, keep challenging yourself, push yourself out of your comfort zone, and you'll probably be on your way.
Prakash, as we go along, we all make mistakes, right? In our career, we make small mistakes, we make big mistakes. There are mistakes which we cover. There are mistakes which we are kind of penalized for. In your perspective, how do you manage mistakes and blunders made by managers? Do you punish them, sack them, or use their mistakes as rich experience as they go ahead?
Mistakes will happen. I think failures are a part of our lives. And if you see a career where the person never really failed or never made a mistake, you'd probably see a career where the person didn't really achieve as much as they might have. And therefore, reaching out for more, aiming to do more, willy-nilly will come with a downside, which is an occasional failure or a mistake. And I think good leaders make it safe for their teams to fail, make it safe for their teams to make a mistake and learn, because that's how I think progress will happen. That's how innovation will happen, or else we'd be stuck. Everybody would be playing safe, doing the things that somebody else told them to do, or doing the things the way they've been done in the past. So no one can ask questions. But that's not what you need for success in the future. I'm a big fan of this idea that a good leader will allow space for teams to fail and not really be the kind of person who shoots the minute somebody has failed. I find it interesting, and I know there are some organizations where, for instance, the Tatas, notably, as an example here, I remember being on the jury of their innovation awards a few years ago, and I was delighted to see they have a host of categories for these innovation awards, which could be around factories, around sales, marketing, around customer, around technology, finance. But my favorite category, Subroto, was one which was called Dare to Fail. And this was about innovation gone wrong. And here was India's, one of India's largest business houses saying, hey, we'd like to congratulate you for daring to fail. And we recognize that this didn't work, but we are delighted that you tried it. And here's the good news. I heard from the folks at the Tatas much later that many of these dare to fail projects actually became innovation award winners in subsequent years. So I think it's a terrific culture which encourages people to make that occasional mistake. Consistent failure, consistent blunders, of course, is not what you'd want. So sure, get tough on that one.
So the next question, Prakash, is we have seen all this as we have gone along, that should managers be chasing careers or should they be chasing businesses?
Managers who chase their careers or managers who chase business? I'm tempted to say neither. I'd love to see managers who chase significance, managers who chase wanting to make a difference to the world that they live in, to the people they work with. I think if you can do that, careers, business, profit, stock price, I think everything will take care of itself. You need to be the kind of manager who genuinely wants to make an impact in the role that you are in, which means making a difference to the business, to the people you work with, to your partners, really to the entire world there. That's what I would look for.
So my next question, Prakash, is that in a pool of talented people, how do you manage a very talented manager who has sharp elbows and who don't play team? How do you sort of manage them?
I love that. Sharp elbows. Yeah. Great one. I guess a starting point for me has been trying to look at the brighter side and looking at what is the good in people. So do acknowledge that. And very often what happens is that the people you're looking at with sharp elbows probably have some unique talents which are valuable. And you don't want the person to forget that, hey, there is respect for that talent, there's value for that talent. And then you try and have those conversations where you tell them that that talent is probably not playing to potential because of those elbows, those down elbows, which are sharp. And you try and get them to recognize that, hey, those sharp elbows have meant that they are having to fight their own battles. Those sharp elbows have meant that they are probably delivering at 110% of their individual capability. But as a team, they're probably underperforming dramatically and that they are not able to leverage the resources that are available to them. So you try and have those conversations and get them to try and see a different way of achieving it. What can happen sometimes is that they can turn around, sometimes it's too late. Sometimes there isn't enough recognition for the fact that this needs to happen. And particularly if people have been successful in their lives or careers, then suddenly being told that they have sharp elbows almost seems like, they're sharp to you, but they are the ones that have made me succeed. And when that happens, it's a good idea to either move them out into roles where those sharp elbows don't come into play, where they're not a part of a team. But if they have to be a part of a team, I would probably take a call and say, not a good idea to have those people in the team, because eventually, I think it'll ruin your team, and you don't want that to happen.
So it is all about people, right? So now share your perspective on how do we nurse talent so that they can self-actualize or we help them do well?
I could be accused of being perhaps biased on that one. But yes, Subroto, I would have to say that much as I admired intellect, I do think that after a certain stage, that tends to become table stakes. What you really want is a learning mind, a curious mind, someone who's really keen to learn. And having done that, for me, the ability to get along with people, to be a part of a team, to make other people feel very good about being a part of your team, I think that is a big one for me and a good marker of leadership potential, indeed, of future success. So I would certainly say yes. I would be very keenly looking at how does this person behave with ordinary folks. And you talked, at the start, you talked about those ordinary men who go on to become great soldiers. And I think the truth is there are no ordinary men. There are extraordinary people who sometimes allow their insane talents to be hidden or to be covered by self-limiting beliefs or these minor behaviors which can hold them back. And I think as a leader, our job really is to help kind of take that off and help those people unleash the leader inside all those people. And for me, that really was the exciting part of being a leader. And I would probably look for that in other people too, to say that if you're a young sales manager, I'd want to see how much do you know about those people who work for you? Are you able to talk about what a great job that salesman has done, or what a fantastic job that delivery dispatch clerk did to make sure that you met your results for last month? Are you able to talk about what other people have done, rather than be the kind of leader who says, oh, it was such a tough one, but I did it. So this I did it, I'm so smart, isn't something that will perhaps take them too far.
Prakash, in a market-driven environment that we work in, and we are talking about high-performance companies, which very often have to restructure, hand out pink slips, and while they invest in people and they expect loyalty in return, because of the nature of the beast that has kind of emerged, how do you expect loyalty in return when there is so much of uncertainty in terms of whether you'll be holding on to your job the next quarter? So how do you manage this?
Interesting point, Subroto. It reminds me of something that I heard on my first day at work at Hindustan Lever. And we were in conversation with the then head of HR, Dr. Om Kaul, delightful man. And I remember one of the other management trainees in the group asking Dr. Kaul this whole question around loyalty. How important is loyalty to the company? And you know what Dr. Kaul said? He says, oh, we don't need anybody's loyalty, because loyalty suddenly suggests that somebody's doing someone else a favor and you expect that other person to be beholden to you for what you've done for them. And he said, we just want you to be true to yourself. Every morning when you look into the mirror, just make sure that you haven't done anything the previous day which kind of stops you from being able to see yourself, to look at yourself in the mirror. And he says, that's all we ask for. We are not asking you to be loyal to an employer. And that's an interesting thought. And independent of whether downsizing is happening, whether pink slips and layoffs are becoming common or not, that's a good way to look at it. I think you want people to be valued for what they do, and you want people to enjoy the time that they spend in an organization without having to worry too much about, oh my goodness, I have done so much for you, so how could you do this to me? Or for organizations to say, I paid a salary to you for 15 years, therefore I expect you to do something for me. I think that makes it too much of a transaction. That makes it commerce. And I don't think that's a great idea. It is unfortunate when layoffs and pink slips happen. And I would probably say that businesses need to perhaps think, what could they have done to prevent this from happening? And if it's avoidable, if it's something that they can say, can all of us take some pain so that it doesn't come to a stage where a few people have to take all the pain? If that can come up, I'd probably say that's a good alternative to look at. But if it does happen and if it's handled well, I think people will recognize that tough. I did everything I could to have a great time in this organization. I think I gave it my all. I think the organization was fair to me. Unfortunately, things went wrong, and this is where I am now. That's the way you want it to be, without worrying too much about, oh my goodness, why me? Or, oh my goodness, how could you do this to me? Don't go there. Move on. That's what you do.
Prakash, I would like to move to an example of someone who is becoming a kind of gold standard of creating talent. That is Rahul Dravid. And Rahul has, in the National Cricket Academy, created a process through which many cricketers are coming out, and he has a huge role to play in ensuring that they perform at their best at the top level. What are the learnings you think corporations can have from someone like Rahul Dravid?
I think Dravid is, of course, a fabulous guy and has had a huge impact both as a cricketer and indeed as the head of the NCA, or indeed as the coach of some of our young, the India A or the under-19 teams. But even Dravid will tell you that, he'd probably tell you that, hey, you're giving me far more credit than I deserve, because there are a whole lot of other factors that might have come into play here. So the good news, Subroto, is that I think in India, 2-3 things have happened. I think there's a lot of effort at the grassroots level to get cricket right. And that's fantastic. So you've got lots of talent scouts, lots of inter-school, young age level cricket happening, fairly strict norms as far as age fudging is concerned. That used to be a bane of Indian cricket and indeed Indian sport for many years, where 25-year-olds would be masquerading and playing under 18 games, which wasn't fair on anybody. But that's changed. I think the IPL has been a huge impact on cricket in general. But what Dravid has done, I think, and his work with the next rung of cricketers is fantastic. Apart from training them on cricket skills, apart from ensuring that they get a chance to play overseas, that they make these India A tours where they're playing at levels which are very close to the real thing. And it's interesting. So when you see a Siraj make his debut, he's played on that wicket before. He's toured that country a couple of times before that debut. So the gap between being a first-class cricketer and being a test cricketer, which earlier used to be a huge step up, has now become just another step into another arena. And I think that is a big thing that Dravid has promoted. The other thing, of course, is where Dravid keeps talking about, it's not only about cricket. It's as much about the head and about getting people to manage success, to handle their success, to be careful about habits at that early stage, which can actually cause things to go wrong much later. And I think he's been a friend, a guide, a philosopher, and someone who these kids have looked up to, not just for advice on, is my bat coming down okay, is my arm all right? Not just about that, but also about saying, hey, how do I think about life? How do I think about careers? And what does it take to continue to slog and work hard to get it right? And I think that's been a huge impactor. And to your point, I think the corporate world needs more Dravids. I think we will all see the benefit of having a Dravid inside our organizations who is encouraging those young people and helping to get them to make that step up more easily, more quickly. So suddenly it's not about saying, oh, he was a fantastic sales guy when I saw him in Calcutta. I don't know what happened. I've made him sales director, but he just doesn't seem to be getting it right. And I think getting a Dravid will help us ensure that people make those transitions more easily. And I think that could be a great role that a good mentor in an organization could play.
My next point, Prakash, is a bit provocative, but I go back to an organization which actually is the fountainhead of management as we know it, which is the military. And during the Second World War, armies demonstrated organizations which supported a strategy. But in the military, every officer is the HR head of his team, right? He is trained for the role. He knows how to train his people. He knows how to set objectives, and he takes them to battle, and he inspires them, and he in fact penalizes them if the man falls short. So if salary, compensation, and benefit is curved out, do we need a HR function at all?
Yeah, that should never stop you from having that great conversation, I think. So, yeah, the way I would see it is that I agree with one half of what you're saying, which is maybe we need all managers in the corporate world to think like the folks in the army and to be the HR heads of their teams, to be the HR heads of their organizations. I think that's a great point you make. And every leader must start seeing herself or himself as that HR leader for the troops that she is responsible for. I agree with that part of it. But does that mean that you should get rid of the HR function in an organization? I'm not sure, because I think what you need is for someone to be sitting on the table and constantly holding up, what does this mean for my people? What does this mean from a people standpoint? And be a steward, be a custodian of the people. And this is not to suggest that everybody else will not do that job, but sometimes in the heat of business, under pressure of results, competition, pricing, profit, sometimes we can compromise the people piece, because what happens is that the damage that you do to your bottom line is visible in that quarter, but the damage that you do to your people is probably visible only a little bit later, but it's far more of havoc that will be caused than perhaps what that little blip in profit in a quarter might have been. And what a good HR head or what that function will do for you is to remind the entire organization of the importance of taking care of our people. So I would certainly say yes, everyone in the corporate, every leader must think of themselves as the HR leader for their teams. But I still think there's a significant role that HR can play in an organization.
Prakash, when you look at a career of a manager, it could be anything between 40 to 45 years. So you are talking about a human resource who needs to be trained over time so that he can participate in building sustainable businesses on one hand, and in case there are challenges, and there will be many, he is able to overcome them and take his team together. So it's a balance between skill building, career building, and holding on to values. How do you think that a person should be trained over a period of time?
I'm reminded of something you just said at the start of this conversation, Subroto. You talked about how at ITC, as a management trainee, you would have this 2-week training program. And you talked about Mr. Haksar, Ajit Haksar, actually being there on the last day and talking to all the trainees. And for me, that is the key piece. It's not only about the training program, but it's also about getting the commitment of the leadership team to the cause. And therefore, I would certainly tell people I speak to in organizations or the HR folks there that leadership training is important, training programs are important, they're an investment you're making for your organization. But what I would also tell them is the worst thing that can happen is when you have all these young trainees who've come in for a training program and it's supposed to be kicked off by the CEO and it starts at 9:30 in the morning, and at 9:30 it's actually the VP for a business who's come in and not the CEO, because the CEO had a clash or something else came up and he couldn't make it and he's really apologetic. To me, that is sending a message about what really matters. And I think that is such an important piece. So it's important for us to ensure we are training our folks. It's the best investment you can make, but it's also important for us as leaders to demonstrate our commitment. I love the story of what happened one day to Starbucks outlets in the United States. I can't remember the date, Subroto, but all Starbucks outlets in the United States were shut from 5 p.m. one evening. So if you walked into the store, you couldn't get yourself your favorite cappuccino. And what had happened, of course, was that Howard Schultz was told that there was a problem, Starbucks wasn't doing too well, and pretty much people had forgotten, the folks at Starbucks had forgotten, what does it take for us to make that fantastic espresso? And somebody came up with the idea that let's train everybody. Now imagine having to train 155,000 people on how to make an espresso. Now you could have said, let's do this 2-week program or a 2-day program, and over the next 6 months, let's put everybody through it. And Schultz said, no way. So he just stopped operations for one evening and got everybody trained that evening. People laughed. It cost Starbucks $7 million in lost sales. And people said it's such a stupid mistake. People called it the most expensive coffee break. And Howard Schultz says, how can that be a mistake? I was training my people to make a better coffee. What is more important than that? And I think that is the mindset that organizations need, that shows to their people that we are committed to our long-term success, and that means we are committed to ensuring you get it right. That's a powerful one for me.
Bravo, Prakash. It's been such fun talking to you, and frankly, I've learned so much during the course of this conversation. I would like to say that there are many words of wisdom that you brought to the table, and I read what you write. I've read your books, and I would urge everyone who's watching this program to read what Prakash writes. And I thank you very much, and more strength to your ideas and thoughts. And I do hope that many people would benefit from what you have to say. Thank you, Prakash.
My pleasure entirely, Subroto. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
For those of you who are watching this program, you would have gathered that this show of ours is about your story and we are listening. Do write to us at the email ID given below. And if you have some great speakers who you think we should be speaking to, just send us a message and it would be a great privilege to get them on our show. Thank you very much for watching. Do write to us, tell us what you don't like, and occasionally tell us what seems to be doing well.